And I want to welcome you to God's plan, chosen for such a time as now. You know, God has an eternal timeline, and way down that way, all the way to the end of time, God had planned. And He, in His divine wisdom, He has placed everyone in this room on His eternal timeline, right here, right now, right today. He's placed you here in this room. He's placed you here in this town. He's placed you here in this political season that we're in. He's placed you in your neighborhood, and all of that, that's God's divine appointment on your life. He has a plan. He knows when He wanted you here to walk this ground. And so we are going to journey with God forward and see what He has in store for us. Now, with smaller classes, I have, in the past, most of the time, I have everyone take off their shoes and leave them outside the door. I do that. And then you can have your shoes afterward. And I'm sorry that you're such a big group and you don't get to do that, because the ones that I've done that before, they always got fuzzy socks. So you don't get any fuzzy socks. But we are a big group, and so that would be kind of difficult for us to do. But I want you to understand the reasoning behind that, and I want you to kind of, in your mind, think that. It's because here it is in the evening, and you have been a dozen places today. Even if it was in your home, you had a dozen different places you went. If you work outside the home, you've been a dozen different places. Some of us, we have children that we're taking care of, grandchildren that we're taking care of. We are that sandwich generation that not only are we taking care of our kids, but we're taking care of our parents. A lot of that is going on. We have just other loved ones. We have a career. We have pickleball, tennis. We have all of those things, and it takes us everywhere. And so by the time the day goes on, we've got a lot of stuff on our shoes that we've carried with us. And then when we leave here, we've got a lot of things that we're going to be doing. For me, that means I've got to get the dogs out of the kennel because they've not been fed yet. I've got to get them fed, get them taken outside, and then get them their treat because they won't eat their supper. You know, and it's just a vicious circle, cramp the pills down their throat that they don't like to take. And but all of us have a different story when we leave here on what we're going to do. And so I want you to know that as we go out, leaving our shoes out there and then picking them up later, that symbolizes that when we walk in the store, we are leaving everything out there, okay? And everything in here is all about us. It's not about that phone call you just had with some grumpy family member. You know, it's not about running into a clerk at the store that had a story to tell that upset you. It's not about anything. In here, this time is about you. So I want you just to think in terms of leaving everything else behind. I also want us to do a little treat for you. And I think the treat for you is for you to take some downtime. So your downtime, you might call it downtime, you might call it chill time, veg time, you might call it a Calgon take me away moment. How many here remember that commercial? Yeah. So, but I want us to take a moment. So I really want you to get into this if you don't care. And so I'm giving you permission to close your eyes. And you don't have to, but close your eyes. I just want you to promise me that if you close your eyes, you don't go to sleep. Okay? And so I'm going to just kind of let everybody know that if you close your eyes and your neighbor sees you dozing off, they're going to jab you. Okay? But I want you to close your eyes and go on a trip with me. And so we are going to travel across to the other side of the world, a place that is far, far away. And as we travel across the world far, far away, we're going to go back far, far back in time. We're going to go back about 2,500 years or so. We're going to go back to the year 470-ish BC. As you travel across there, I want you to visualize going over the ocean. I want you to visualize the terrain that you might run into. So where we're going, I want you to think in modern day Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Lebanon, Egypt, that area of the world. And it's okay with me however you picture that. However you see that is fine. But as you go there, then I want you to go deep into the Persian Empire with me. All right? And as we travel to the Persian Empire, we are going to go to the citadel of Susa. So however that looks, arriving there, I want you to go. We're going to walk through the city gates, and as we go through those gates, I want you to picture a hustling, bustling city. When you go back in that far, I don't want you to picture something primitive. I would rather you think of something innovative. Because, you know, the Persians were a very forward-thinking people. They were about power. They were large. They were 127 provinces, and they were spread out. So it was a large place. And they were all about power. They were about material values. They were about careers. They loved their gold. As a matter of fact, they loved gold so much that they not only made jewelry, but they made reclining sofas made out of gold. They made chariots out of gold. They were all about that sort of thing. They were all about materials. They were all about art. They were all about sports. And so picture that. I want you to picture that there were people there that were the rich and the poor, those in the know and those who didn't have a clue. They were all there. There were the desperate and there were the sick. I want you to go ahead and picture the school of medicine that they had. They were very forward-thinking in trying to come up with cures for diseases, much like typhus and malaria. So they were doing that. They were all about trade with other countries. As a matter of fact, they had a very sophisticated trade route that ran through Asia and Europe and into Africa. It was such a big deal that the United States actually fashioned the original post office delivery system by that. So they were very forward thinking. As we get to the city and you go through all this hustle and bustle, I want you to go ahead and walk through the columns of the palace where King Xerxes and Queen Vashti live. We're going to go ahead and walk through those columns, and we're going to go to the center of the palace. And there's where we will find King Xerxes and his advisors. Now, I call his advisors the iffy gang, because frankly, their advice was iffy at best. You know what I mean? But he is there with them, and they are planning a campaign. They want to conquer Greece. King Xerxes' father, King Cyrus, had actually started a campaign, and so King Xerxes was going to pick that up and go forward with it. So his advisors were trying to think of how they could do that that would best suit the king, but they knew a lot about King Xerxes. See, they knew that he was powerful, that he was greedy, that he was all about feast, as we'll discover. He wanted his way. He was a narcissist. There are accounts that he was tall, dark, and handsome. But isn't that what most fairy tales make a king? We are not talking about a fairy tale, though. We are talking about the story of Esther, and it's very much real. But there are accounts that saying that he was handsome to look at. But he is there. The advisors are trying to figure out how to pacify the king and get accomplished what he was wanting to do. So they came up with an idea, and the king agreed with it. So for 6 months, they put on a huge display. And this display was just out of this world. It showed off all the wealth of the Persian Empire. And they invited the military personnel. They invited the political people of the day, and just anyone that was of any importance. They made sure that during that 6-month period that they came and saw what King Xerxes put on display. So he made it a point to make it huge. The purpose of that was that he wanted to make sure that the people, first off, that he ruled over knew how wealthy they were. He also wanted to kind of intimidate them because he had a lot of power. But he also wanted the word to get out to the Greeks because he wanted to conquer them and he wanted them to feel very intimidated. So that is what they did for 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, then the king said, let's have a 1-week feast and let's invite the whole city of Susa. So it didn't matter whether you were the wealthy or the poor, the ones in the know or the ones that didn't have a clue. You were invited to the palace for a full week of feasting. King Xerxes had his feast, and Queen Vashti had hers at the same time for the women. So everybody came. Now, I imagine during that time they had a lot of entertainment. They probably had the mime troops that came. They had the sports figures. Maybe the Olympian star came out to show off during that time. They had music. When people arrived, they walked down mosaic pathways of mother of pearl and other precious stones. They passed by those golden reclining sofas. They went through white curtains with blue ties on them. I imagine there was every kind of imported flower out there, just beautiful, luxurious surroundings. The servants were told to, as these people came, that there were no restraints. There was just anything that they wanted. And the servants were actually told to stay at the elbow of all the guests and keep their cups full of wine. And these goblets that they had, these were not just the regular run-of-the-mill factory type goblets. These were all custom goblets that they held. So when someone came to the party, they knew this was a special place. Well, I don't know how you picture a week-long party of feasting and drinking and no restraints at all, but I imagine that was quite a scene at the end of a week. Well, King Xerxes was feeling high in his spirits, and he decided he had something that he could display that he hadn't put on display yet. So he sent his 7 eunuchs to Queen Vashti, and they were to summon her to come to his court so that he could show her off to all the men. And she was to come with her crown. Now, I've heard and I've researched, and I've heard pastors that have researched, and they all come to the agreement that they don't know. But there is the idea that either King Xerxes summons her to come with her crown and full royal robe, just all her regal attire, that he was summoning her for that, or that he was summoning her to wear her crown, period. So we don't know which it was. And back in that day, it could have been either. But I think Queen Vashti was tired. I mean, I could just almost guarantee she was tired. I mean, she had been having to entertain guests for 6 months, and now her house had been full of all kinds of women for a week. And so I think she was really tired, because when the eunuchs came to get her, she said no. Well, that's very brave for a queen to do, but I say you go, girl. I mean, because what woman wants to be paraded in front of men, whether you're closely attired or just have a crown on? I'd rather just wear my crown and sit in front of the TV than just be paraded around. But the word went back to the king, and the king was furious. I mean, he was embarrassed, and he was furious. Well, he asked the Ippy gang, what should I do? And they said to him, well, I'm telling you, everyone has seen what has happened. And so we can't let the word get out without something going on. And so what you need to do is you need to send out an edict to all 127 provinces that women are to respect their husbands, And just to show how severe this is, you need to banish Queen Vashti, so she will never be in your sight again, and take her crown away. We'll find someone else to wear the crown for you. Well, since the whole idea that he had of the 6 months of grand display and the week-long festivities that went on, and she had just taken and squashed it with one little word and embarrassed him so much, he decided that's the extreme that he needed to go. So that's what he did. And that closes our first chapter of Esther. That closes the scene of our little traveling. So if y'all are still awake, you can look up now. Some of you should get a little bit of time to raise your head. But I tell you what, when I get to that part of the story, though, I always get a little discouraged. Because when I go on a trip, I want to go and enjoy myself. You know, I just want to go and have a good time. I want to escape everything that is going on. And what we did is we traveled back 2,500 years, and what did we find? We found a society that looked different, talked different, ate different foods, had different leaders, and in all of that, we found the same kind of situation that we have today. We found materialism, we found power, we found greed, we found no restraint. Have any of you looked out there recently and said, oh, everything's going good? Or have you looked out there and said, wow, where are we headed? So that is what is kind of discouraging to me. You know, I think that Jesus, when he walked this earth, he had a feel for that, because 2,000 years ago when he walked during that time, he had the same thing. He saw the same type of situation. But you know, we can go all the way back to the time of Adam and Eve, when everything was perfect. I mean, they had everything that they could ever want. It was totally perfect. And what did we find? We found a pair who got tempted with a little bit of a morsel of a thirst for greed, for knowledge, and they bit. And when they bit, they got bit back. And when they got bit back, we did too. And so since the beginning of time, we have seen this type of situation going on, where there is just hatred, division, and loneliness, discouragement, chaos, where you can't separate the truth from what's not true. It's very difficult. And I don't know where you have been in your life. I can speak from my experience, but I would just about guarantee everybody in this room has been bit before. You may have brought it on yourself, that you did something that was just greedy, or you were pushing for a promotion at work, or you were having a family situation and you got into it with your husband and it came back and it bit you, and the results were big. Maybe you had a thirst for drugs or alcohol, or excessive non-restraint like that, and you found that it came back to bite you. Maybe you didn't have anything big like that, but you just had some disappointments. Maybe you had some things that happened to you that you didn't have any control of. Maybe you had some abuse happen to you. Maybe you had someone walk out on you. Maybe you had a health situation crop up that you didn't want any part of. Maybe your favorite person left this world too early for your desires, and you felt the bite. That's what our world is about today. And so we all, in a way, were wounded. We all need a healing. We all, at some point, we come to a crossroad where we want to know which way to go. We come to a time of transition that we just need to know what step to take next. We come to a roadblock and we know that we've got to turn around in order to survive. So that is a lot of what we will actually be taking a look at these first few sessions, is how do we deal with some of those things, those wounds that we have, or how do we deal with those transitions that we're going through? Because I don't know what drew you here, but the name of the study is called God's Plan. And I think most of us are here wanting to know what God's plan is. Well, I want to tell you, God's plan for you is good. So in order for us to do that, the very first thing we're going to do these first couple weeks is we're going to lay a foundation. And we want to make sure that our foundation is rock solid. We want to know that wherever we start building from, that it's unmovable, unchangeable, and we do that with God and His truth. You know, the Bible says in the New Testament that the wise man builds his house on a rock, and the unwise build on sand. And so when the storms came, which house stood? The one on the rock. And so that's going to be our example. We want to build on the rock. And so I don't know if you brought your Bibles or not, but I invite you, if you did, and it's also in your lesson, to turn to Acts chapter 17. And we're going to look at this real quick. So in Acts 17, we see Paul, and he's actually in Athens, and he's been on a mission trip, and he has come to the town, and there are philosophers and everybody out there, and as he gets there, he notices that there are idols, and these idols are to the sun, the moon, the stars, the love, fertility, and he notices an altar that's made to the unknown God. So that's where we're going to start, is where Paul started with these people. Because where we're going to lay our foundation is on the truth of God. And we're going to get very simplistic. We're going to say, who is God? That's what we're going to start. Literally on that very bottom line. Who is God? So he says in here, starting in verse 24, the God who made the world and everything in it, He is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by hands. Neither is He served by human hands, as though He needed anything, since He Himself gives everyone life and breath and all things. So the first thing we want to learn about God and understand is He is sovereign. The sovereignty of God is what Paul was telling these people. So here it is. God is all-powerful, all-knowing, always has been, always will be. He's everywhere. He's created everything and everyone. He does what He wants, when He wants, and how He wants. And you know what? It doesn't matter what you think about that. Because He is God and He is sovereign. That's who He is. And because He doesn't change for us, then we can stand assured that He doesn't change for the person over there. He is God. He is all-powerful. He is all-knowing. He is solid truth. And that's where we start with the sovereignty of God. His truth and love and mercy and justice, it can always be counted on. I can never think of a time in my life where I couldn't depend on God's love and trust. So the second thing that Paul told him is in that next verse. It says, from one man He made all the nations, so that they should inhabit the whole earth, and He marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their land. Well, what he's telling them there is that word they've already mentioned is the providence of God. We read in Exodus an example of providence where the Pharaoh's daughter was in the right place so that she could hear the tiny cry of a baby in the water that went under Pharaoh, so that he could be raised up to be the one who delivered the Egyptians. So that was by divine guidance. That was by the providence of God. In Daniel 2, it says God removes kings. He removes them, and He sets up kings. He puts them in place according to His will. In Proverbs 16, listen to this one. In their hearts, humans plan their course. How many of you make plans? But the Lord establishes their steps. So we can make all the plans we want to, but the providence of God is what is going to plan our steps. In Ephesians 1, it says, God works everything in conformity with the purpose of His will. See, God didn't create everyone and everything and then go back to heaven and set up and say, you know what, I'm just going to, y'all have at it, I'm just going to be amused for a while. That's not what God did. He is interacting and He is intervening in our lives, and He's been doing that from before you were ever born. So God is sovereign. We see the providence of God, and then we see the plan of God. And that's what we really are going to focus on. But this is what it says in verse 27. God did this so that they would seek Him and perhaps reach out for Him and find Him, though He is not far from any one of them. For in Him we live and move and have our being. So God's plan, if you want to just take it to the very just nuts and bolts of it, God's plan is to have a family. His plan is for relationship. And that's where He says He did this, all of this, so that we might seek Him out and want to have that relationship with Him. So that leaves us. And Paul speaks on that. What is the duty of humankind? That is who God is, sovereign and providential, and has a plan. Then what is our duty? It says in verse 29, therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. See, he was talking to them, and they had all these idols made out of all these things. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance. I like one translation says God winked at such ignorance. But in the past, God overlooked such ignorance. But now He commands all people everywhere to repent. For He has set a day when He will judge the world with justice by the man He has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising this man from the dead. So what is our duty? Our duty, first off, is for us to decide whether we want to be a member of God's family. I mean, that's as basic as it gets. God wants a family. He's done all of this to have a family. So are we going to be a part of His family? We can't get any more basic than that. If you're a Christ follower, then you know that's where your journey begins with God, because we all know, even if you tend to grow up in church, you've seen it on t-shirts, John 3:16. And it says, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. And a lot of times you'll hear people say about a judgmental God, a God, that He would judge us if we didn't love Him. But the next verse says, for God did not send His Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through Him might be saved. God is a God of love. God is a God who wants a family. He has a plan. His plan for you is good. So we're going to close up on this, is God's sovereignty in relationship to you. Jeremiah 1:5 says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. That's God's sovereignty speaking directly to you. God's providence in relationship to you. Jeremiah 1:5. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. That's God having a plan for you. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Ladies, His plan for you is good. I mean, it is good. But in order for us to get started on that solid ground, we first have to make sure that we want to be part of His family. That's where we have set our mind, is that we are going to be a part of His family. That is your responsibility. That's your first responsibility. So as I end tonight, my only question for you is, what is